There are a lot of misconceptions regarding certain words that either describe a sound or are some kind of technical terms that do something with the sound, and especially in the guitar player world, a lot of these words are quite misunderstood and sometimes even misused. Now, the word that I have ready for today is not exactly that complicated because today we're going to be talking about gain. Everybody's heard of gain. Pretty much every pedal and every amplifier has a gain knob. You just turn the gain knob and you are going to get like more distortion and that kind of stuff, so it's pretty much clear. But is it? So basically what I decided I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna grab my shroom cup, I'm gonna fill it up with something absolutely lovely, and I definitely encourage you to spend the next few minutes with me listening to me talk about some misconceptions and some interesting things about gain. And even if you know everything about gain, just stick around, hang out with all of us. We're gonna be talking about gain. Let's go. All right, so the first thing about gain that we should basically understand, pretty much everybody knows this, that a technical explanation of gain is actually, gain is an amplification factor. It's like a ratio between the output signal and the input signal. So it's like a number that you would basically multiply your input signal and you would get your output signal. Like, that's the boring technical explanation of it. What most people actually don't know is that gain in pedals, any kind of audio device, amplifiers, everywhere, the gain is actually fixed. So there is a number that, let's say this pedal has a gain factor of 1000, for example. And pretty much every active component in the pedal has like a fixed amplification factor. So it has like a fixed gain. If you take a Marshall amplifier, it has a fixed gain. Now you're gonna ask the question, well, how is it fixed? Because you have this gain knob. Basically, the gain knob is just cutting signal. And as a result, when you cut signal at a certain point in the circuit, the result will be like less gain, but it doesn't really change the amplification of the certain amplification device that you're using. Now, misconception number one that is actually worth mentioning is that most people actually think that more gain means more distortion. In practice, with a lot of guitar equipment, that is true, but that is really a misuse of the term. Now, I didn't come here to become a smartass. I'm just using this whole thing as an excuse to explain a few things which might be interesting to you. Therefore, I need to mention the second misconception, and that is that gain equals volume, which is also not necessarily true. Even though when you use a Fender amplifier, for example, and you increase the gain, yeah, you're gonna get more volume up until a certain point. Now, here's the thing, usually we mix some of these terms because when you would have, for example, a pedal like this one, it has a gain knob and a volume knob, all right? It's a DIY pedal. So the gain knob is pretty much very similar to the volume knob, and both of them are actually gain knobs, just they're in different positions in the circuit. Some pedals have like a fuzz knob, but it's also basically a gain knob. Sometimes you would have like a saturation knob or something like that, but it's also pretty much like a gain knob. And the reason why we actually hear more distortion when we increase the gain knob is basically because something called clipping happens. Now, that is a completely different term, but we are coming to the point where I actually want to talk how this distortion is basically generated. Now, if we think about it in 3D, I like this example because imagine that your sound is like a spiral, and it's like spiraling, but it's actually spiraling through a pipe. And this pipe is of a fixed diameter. Now take a look at this example. If the spiral is small, it is sort of spiraling through the pipe. But as the spiral grows, when you increase the gain knob, so you're letting like more signal through, it is eventually going to reach the boundaries of the pipe, the inner wall of the pipe. And what's going to happen then? Basically, your spiral is going to fight to become larger, but it doesn't work because the pipe is strong, and therefore it's going to start deforming the spiral, and as a result we're going to get a different sound. And in the guitar world, it sort of like starts with some kind of soft compression and slowly soft clipping, and the more you increase the gain, it's going to become like some kind of hard clipping, and you are going to get more distortion and more harmonic content. Hey, so what we actually have so far is that if we didn't have these constraints of this imaginary pipe, these constraints which are actually set by some kind of electrical conditions within that piece of audio equipment, we would not actually be getting any clipping because our signal would actually be able to grow and grow and grow without any constraint, which is pretty much not realistic and possible in nature. We always have some kinds of constraints, but depending on how large the diameter of the pipe is, or the headroom of the amplifier is, we are going to be getting more or less clipping for the same amount of gain. Does that make sense? So the bigger the pipey thing, the larger the signal that you can actually run through it. You know, if you find this information useful, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, it doesn't cost you anything, and visit the Slightly Technical Academy at slightlytechnicalacademy.com, because over there you can actually register for free and get some free Tonex packs and actually access some technical pages. And I've got some courses upcoming which are going to be really cool. And to get things even more complicated, if you think about your audio signal passing through an audio device, this device actually has multiple pipes of different diameters at different points in the path. So in some places you're gonna get some clipping, and in some places you're not gonna get any clipping. No matter how much you increase the gain knob, you're only going to be getting volume. So basically all these knobs are doing pretty much the same thing, just in different points in the circuit. And that brings us to the topic of gain staging. Now, gain staging can be thought of in many different ways. You can gain stage two different pedals, you can connect them, and you can consider each of these pedals to be a gain stage. You can also think of gain staging when you think of the small components that make this pedal, like you connect multiple gain stages inside of the pedal to create some kind of end result. Or you can even think of amplifiers. You've probably heard that amplifiers have multiple gain stages. So basically what I'm saying is that if you want to get more gain, you would need more gain stages, and they kind of multiply, because let's say that one gain stage would have a gain factor of 100, and you run another gain stage after that first gain stage that has also a gain factor of 100, the resulting gain would be 100 times 100, which is quite a lot. And then you have a third gain stage, and then you have another gain stage. And it's actually quite complicated because you have to do a thing called gain staging, and that is actually adjusting the levels when these gain stages are connected. Because if you let the signal just pass through, like unfiltered and unattenuated, you're going to be overloading the following gain stage, and that usually doesn't really result in a very good sound. And you might have noticed that a lot of amplifiers don't really sound that great when you turn the gain all the way up. They usually have a sweet spot somewhere in between. That is obviously not always the case, but in a lot of amplifiers, that is actually the truth. And that is because you're overloading the following gain stage. You don't want to overload the following gain stage. Now, different gain stages, different equipment, different designs, some of them like to be overloaded, some of them not so much. You've probably noticed by using pedals to overdrive certain amplifiers, sometimes it sounds great, sometimes it doesn't sound that great, and that pretty much has something to do with the design of the first gain stage of your amplifier. But the question is, what is a healthy gain? Because everybody talks about the healthy gain, but a lot of people are actually struggling to hear when there is enough gain. Because a lot of people will tell you, turn the gain down, it sounds better. Well, is that actually true? Well, listen, I am a fan of gain, but definitely some amplifiers don't do the high gain thing really well, where some amplifiers don't really do the low gain thing really well, and you actually need to crank the gain. So it really depends on the taste, but healthy gain is actually a thing. And healthy gain you're going to get with very well designed amplifiers. One very good example, which is kind of popular on the internet, is actually Dumble and his philosophy, because it has been known that he said proper gain staging leads to like a very nice, great sounding, great feeling, creamy, or whatever gain. And that is actually the truth, because all of these components actually work well in a certain spot. And if you make this certain component, which is the main component in the gain stage, work more than it actually likes to, then the sound actually gets smaller and squashed and anemic sounding. Where if you keep multiple gain stages in their sweet spots and just add enough gain stages so you reach the amount of distortion that you want, you like, you are going to be getting a thing called healthy gain. And you can actually make this test on your own by taking multiple overdrive pedals, connecting them together, engaging all of them, and trying to figure out at what levels of gain and volume are you getting a healthy sound without overloading any of the pedals in the process. And I totally advise that you do these tests with a lot of volume because it's really hard to hear these things on headphones. Alright, so I hope you like this little talk about gain and gain staging. Let me know down in the comments whether you use some kind of gain staging on your pedal board with different pedals. How do you use your amplifier, and did you have any experience with these things that I'm actually talking about? I hope you found this video beneficial. Like, share, subscribe, and all this kind of things, and I'll be seeing you in the next one very soon.